appreciate your tremendous leadership, all that you do, not just at Christian Fellowship, but for the community and in connection, of course, with the leadership role, your elevation uh, before the conference, to all of the other distinguished members of the clergy, the elders who are with us, AY participants. It's just a blessing to be able to share some words with you, and I look forward to our dialogue as well. I'll just frame the conversation. As many of you know, yes, I'm honored to serve in the United States Congress and be a public servant, but I grew up and still attend the Cornerstone Baptist Church. And I recognize that even though I serve in public office, we ultimately answer to only one authority, Almighty God. And as Dr. Martin teaches us, the scripture says, unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. We're certainly thankful for the presence of the Lord right now. It's the government's job to perform. But I know enough to know only Jesus Christ has the power to transform. And so I'm just thankful for the SDA Church and for you being a shelter in the time of storm as we've navigated our way through the trials and tribulations of the moment. What a time it's been as we deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, public health crisis, and an economic crisis at the same time, a racial justice crisis. We know we've come a long way in America. We still have a long way to go. Systemic racism has been in the soil of this country for more than 400 years. And we still need to extricate that which remains in our soil. And lastly, of course, we're dealing with a democracy crisis, a voter suppression epidemic that we've seen all across the land, unleashed on us by people who've chosen, instead of running toward democracy in the aftermath of the violent insurrection that occurred on January 6th, running away from democracy. And so from the very beginning of this new administration, we've had an approach that has been anchored in fundamentally trying to do three things: crush the virus, revive, rescue, and supercharge our economy, create an economy that works for everybody, not just the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected, an economy that works for our community, for working families, middle-class folks, those who aspire to be part of the middle class, young folks, seniors, the poor, the sick, the afflicted, the least, the lost, and the left behind, an economy that works for everyone. And then certainly, we've been called upon to make sure that we defend our democracy and deal with the voter suppression epidemic. This past week, as Pastor Martin alluded to, we have had a momentous week of activity. I began the week on Monday at the White House when the president signed into law the bipartisan infrastructure agreement, the largest federal investment in infrastructure in at least a century. It's going to fix our crumbling bridges, roads, tunnels, airports, mass transit system, our airport, our water and sewage system. It's going to invest approximately $10 billion in New York City transit and the MTA. That means that those service cuts and fare hikes were on the table prior to the passage of our infrastructure agreement. As Governor Hochul just indicated, there will be no fare hikes and there will be no service cuts. And that's a direct result of the passage of the infrastructure agreement and it being signed into law. As part of the infrastructure agreement, we believe that millions of good paying jobs are going to be created all across the country. And we are working with organized labor, with the building trades to make sure that our communities get access to those job opportunities, which are good paying middle class jobs. But far too often, We've been shut out of the construction trades. We're not going to allow that to happen this time around because the opportunities will be so vast with this level, $1.2 trillion being invested in infrastructure and millions of jobs being created. We cannot be shut out, and we will not. Last piece that I'll highlight from the infrastructure agreement, and all of this is done, all of this is the law of the land now, is that we have about $65 billion allocated to make sure that everyone has access to high-speed internet in urban America, rural America, small town America, and Appalachia. We know that high-speed internet access has become particularly important in the pandemic world that we now live in. We are all able to communicate with each other. I can participate in this tremendous AY program. Many of us are continuing to worship in person and virtually in combination because of access to high-speed internet, but not everyone in our community has that capacity. Not everyone can afford it. But as a result of the infrastructure agreement that is now the law of the land, we are going to be making sure that there's access in every single zip code across the country. And if because of your financial circumstances, you are unable to afford high-speed internet, the federal government will help assist you in providing a broadband benefit to pay for it as a result of the infrastructure agreement. And so it was a tremendous step forward as part of our effort to create an economy that works for everyone. Lastly, and then I look forward to our conversation. On Friday, we passed the Build Back Better Act and sent it over to the Senate. So it's not law, but it's a tremendous step forward. And the Build Back Better Act in broad categories is designed to do three things. It's going to create millions of good paying jobs in addition to those jobs that are part of the infrastructure agreement in areas like home care or child care or health care or education because of the levels of investment that are being made, including universal pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds all across the country, as well as investments in home care. Many of our family members in the Caribbean American community, the continental African community, the African American community are home care workers. They are overworked and underpaid. But in the Build Back Better Act, we invest $150 billion historic investment in home care to make sure that the quality of how our family members are cared for is elevated and that the quality of pay is increased significantly. We also extend the child tax credit, which of course has been providing hundreds of dollars per child for tens of millions of families, including hundreds of thousands in our central Brooklyn community each and every month. That was scheduled to expire in December. The Build Back Better Act will extend that program moving forward. We have to make it permanent, but we'll have some room to do that. That is a tax cut for working families and for middle-class folks. And then lastly, in terms of the Build Back Better Act, we are going to lower costs for everyday Americans in a variety of areas, lower childcare costs, lower healthcare costs, lower education costs, lower housing costs. We invest $150 billion in the creation and preservation of affordable housing. And we're going to lower the high cost of life-saving prescription drugs for our seniors who on average pay about $6,000 per year. We will cap that at no more than $2,000, resulting in at least $4,000 in savings for most seniors in our community every year moving forward. And so, Pastor, there's a lot that is in the bills that we've been advancing. Those are just the highlights. But I don't want to take up any more time, so we have time for our conversation. And so, as we say in Washington, I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, thank you so much, Congressman Jeffries. And we certainly want to applaud your powerful efforts there. You have done an amazing job, and we're grateful for your leadership and your hard work. I know you spend countless hours trying to do this. I also want to extend a welcome to our other Paul leaders who may be here from other churches who are joining us. We're glad that you're in this meeting as well. Now, as we ask questions, we want to make sure, we want to maintain a certain decorum and a certain type of respect as we dialogue with our congressional leader here. We want all our questions to be relative to what he addressed us with. Okay, let's keep the questions there. Now, you're going to raise, your hands are raised, but we want to recognize your raised hands. And I'm going to ask for Troy, you will help us with this in terms of who's raising their hand so we can get to their question. I see Elder Rory, I saw your hand up. Elder Rory Richards, I see your hand up, but we can acknowledge him, Troy.
Okay, Elder Rory, you could go ahead.
Thank you, Pastor Martin. Thank you, Troy. Congressman Jeffries, thank you for addressing us, and thank you for the wonderful work that you have been doing and continue to do on behalf of the most vulnerable of society, in particular minoritized people who do not necessarily have access or have been marginalized away from much of the needed services that are provided. The infrastructure bill that has been passed is wonderful, and the elements that you outlined a while ago, they are really idealistic. What we want to know is, what's the timeline for these things to really begin to have an impact on the common man here in New York, the common daycare center, the common student who has no internet or has problems with accessing great Wi-Fi for online learning, the common nurse or doctor or healthcare provider? What's the timeline for that kind of impact to really be seen or felt? Thank you, sir, for your answer.
Yeah, Elder Rory, thank you so much for that very important question and for your kind words. And Sister Rory, great to see you as well. I think the programs and activity connected to the infrastructure agreement, particularly the impact on our mass transportation system, those investments should begin to flow. The immediate impact will be felt in that the NPA's contemplated fare increase has been halted and shelved. So that's probably the most immediate impact, and that's a direct result of the infrastructure bill having been passed. In terms of some of the service improvements that we expect, I think we're looking at probably a 3 to 6 month window to some degree as the money leaves the federal government, makes it into the MTA can begin to deploy it. But they have a whole host of capital projects that have been backed up or put on hold because of a lack of capital, and many of them can now be put into place. And I would ask the church, if there are issues and challenges, that you've seen in terms of the subway, whether that's the L train or the C train issues or the A train or the buses that one takes, or the number 2, the number 5 lines, which are not too far from the church, Christian Fellowship, let us know, because, together with Congresswoman Clark, we can say we fought for the MTA to receive these resources. Now, here are some of the changes that our community is saying they'd like to see in terms of improvements. As it relates to the broadband benefit, again, because that $65 billion is part of the infrastructure agreement, and the infrastructure agreement has now been signed into law, we expect that early next year, that broadband benefit should be available. And The administration will be working on the implementation and rollout, but they understand that we'd like to see the resources flowing as soon as possible. And I'd anticipate that that will be made available early next year, and we'll certainly make sure that the church has all of the information so that and the conference, so that people can get access to that particular benefit as well. Many of the other infrastructure projects in terms of the work on the bridges, the roads, the tunnels, the airport, in many parts of the district that I represent, in Canarsie, for instance, we know that there's a real problem with the sewer infrastructure and is in desperate need of repair. I'm going to be fighting for those repairs to be prioritized. But we anticipate that work on those infrastructure projects are probably going to begin somewhere between 6 months to a year from now. But that gives us time to make sure that we are, that our community members are prepared for the job opportunities that are going to be brought about. And so I think that that time period actually gives us the space to make sure that the building trades and others, we want to see a diverse workforce. I don't want to see a single project, particularly in our community. I don't want to drive by it and folks are working there who don't look like us.
All right.
And that's going to be the message. On some of these other issues, childcare, healthcare, because that's part of the Build Back Better Act, and that's been passed by the House, but not the Senate yet, the time frame is a little unclear.
Right. Thank you. Troy, who we have next? Next question.
Sister Garrett is next.
Okay. Sister Garrett, go ahead. Unmute your phone, Sister Garrett. Or
Thank you. Unmuted. Congressman Jeffries, it's Sister Garrett.
Hey, Sister Garrett, good to see you.
It's always wonderful to see you. And thank you for doing wonderful things in Washington. So I have 2 questions for you, but I don't think the answers are going to be very long. Oh, by the way, thank you for the new ferry landing that we have in Coney Island.
Yes.
Are you responsible for that?
I worked with that. I worked with Mark Traeger on that, and I'm so glad that that it's available to the people of Coney Island who have long been transportation starved.
Oh, thank you. I knew you were behind it. Thank you. And also to the new infrastructure bill that was just passed and the Build Back Better Act that is coming. I was under the impression that at one time they were all together. So and they were separated for some reason.
Yeah.
You'll tell me what the reason is. And secondly, to add to that, I'd like to know if, with the flooding issues we have in Coney Island, would the infrastructure money also handle that?
Great question.
Of course, it's me.
So both of them. You're correct that initially we contemplated that the infrastructure bill, its formal name is the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, but people in Congress don't even use the formal name, so I'll call it the infrastructure bill, in partnership with the Build Back Better Act. Initially, we envisioned that they were going to move forward together, but it became clear to us that the Build Back Better Act still had some challenges and some hurdles that needed to be overcome in the Senate with our 2 favorite senators, Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema.
Yes.
And so if any of y'all know folks in Arizona or West Virginia, have them call their senators to tell them we need them to get on board. But because there were challenges to still be worked through on the Build Back Better Act, we basically concluded we don't want to hold up progress on the infrastructure agreement. Let's get this done. And so we got it out of the House. It had already passed the Senate and went to the president's desk. So those benefits can begin to flow. In terms of the flooding issue, which is a challenge for a lot of folks now in lower lying areas, the Coney Island Peninsula, a lot of folks live in Canarsie. I also represent Howard Beach, where there's significant flooding. The infrastructure bill, because we're building and fixing things in a resilient, sustainable way is going to make a difference. And the Build Back Better Act also invests about $400 billion in trying to create a resilient economy dealing with the impact of climate change, which, in part has resulted in sea level rise, which then has resulted in flooding issues. So Coney Island Creek is an issue we want to, deal with, and Canarsie is surrounded by 3 different bodies of water. We have some issues to be able to deal with there, but these bills, both are going to be helpful in that regard.
Thank you, Congressman. You are the hardest working person in Washington. Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, Sister Garrett.
Okay, Troy, we have another question.
Yes, we have Miss Kanaya Dunkley, and then that would be followed by Pastor Dr. Vernon Jordan.
Okay, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Congressman Jeffries. My name is Kenya Dunkley, and my question is, how would it be possible for the structure for the young community and also Black people community to get the information to know when they're seeking jobs? Sometimes that information do not reach to that community, and most of them, as you just mentioned, is white American that looking for those jobs. How would it be possible for to reach out to the Black community for them to know that these jobs are open for them?
It's a great question, very important one. And, I think what we hope to be able to do, and my staff has joined me, I think Marie, my director of operations, who worked closely with Dr. Martin, and then Tasia, my chief of staff, as well, may be on. But I've been talking to Congresswoman Clark. Of course, she and I work very closely together. And I think what we're going to try to do is to have an infrastructure jobs fair in partnership with the building trades and others, so that we are making sure that the job opportunities are available to our communities, that we're getting prepared for them, or we're creating pathways into the unions through apprenticeships where necessary. But President Biden has been very clear that this is an opportunity to deal with some inequities that have existed in communities for a long period of time. And this level of investment will help correct them.
Right.
But of course, we don't want that just to be theoretical. We want it to be practical. And so we'll definitely be leaning into providing the church and the community with the information. And you can expect a lot of activity from Congresswoman Clark and myself together to make sure that that happens.
Congressman, just to follow up on what she's asking, there's another point I'd like to stick in there. And that is, as African Americans and people of color, we always looking for people to hire us. I'm wondering if in this particular bill, what we can look at doing is creating some entrepreneurship, so that I know there's a lot of red tape involved with government contracts. It is not an easy, it's not easy to be able to get one of those contracts and be approved. But I do believe the time has arrived for us as people of color to not just be employees, but to be employers. And I would really like for you and Congresswoman Clark to pursue that. Let's see how we can spur some entrepreneurship in our communities. We have a lot of tradespeople in our communities that are exceptionally skilled. But in terms of forming the business structures where they can get some of these contracts, I think there's some work to be done there.
Yeah, great point, Pastor. And I think there will be a real emphasis on both making sure women and minority-owned businesses have these opportunities. And we'll be working with the new mayor and his administration, Mayor-elect Adams, as well as the new governor and her administration, Kathy Hochul, to ensure that there's a real focus on the MWB aspect, both those that exist and nurturing those who want to pursue these entrepreneurial opportunities. And what we have found, what the statistics show, I'm so glad you brought this up, Pastor, is that when the owners, the contractors are diverse, the workforce tends to be diverse.
Mhm.
But when the owners and the contractors are not diverse, that's when we run into more problems with the workforce. And so you can tackle both issues in many ways, both the jobs and the entrepreneurship when you diversify the business owners, the entrepreneurs, and the contractors. Very good point.
Thank you. Dr. Jordan's going to speak, but I would like for you guys, for the congressional leadership, help us to see how we can be able to help you with that. Because we know the members of our churches, we know the leaders in our communities, and it's time for us to mobilize them to get organized and to be positioned to be the type of business leaders that can seize some of these contracts. Okay, Dr. Jordan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martin, and thank Congressman for the information and for your presence with us this evening. I have a quick question. Now, when this level of spending is put forward, one of the concerns that could be looked at is waste and fraud. So the money is approved, and when it comes to the work that gets done, it doesn't reach the target because somehow much of it gets siphoned off somewhere. So what is in place to keep an eye that the monies are actually spent in the communities as opposed to be missing? And well, we approved this much, but it never reached down to where our people are and our constituents are because someone else got their sticky fingers on it. So that's my question.
Yeah, thanks so much, Dr. Jordan. Very important question and observation, particularly with this level of investment, all right, the 1.2 trillion already authorized through the infrastructure agreement, and then possibly another 1.7 or so trillion connected to the Build Back Better Act, spread out over a 10-year period of time. But that is a substantial amount of money. I know the administration has just appointed the former mayor of New Orleans, Mitch Landrieu, to be the infrastructure czar, to oversee the implementation and the spending of the resources that have been allocated. And then he'll have a whole team that he'll work with. We're in the process of setting up a meeting with former Mayor Landrieu, who's had a close relationship with the Black community down in New Orleans for a long period of time, and so has the Landrieu family. So I believe he's sensitive to these issues, both in terms of making sure that the money gets spent in the right places and spent efficiently. But I'll be having that conversation with him to get a real sense of how they anticipate putting mechanisms in place on the ground to ensure that it's spent the right way. An additional quick point in this area, we are in the Build Back Better Act, we allocate $150 billion for housing. That is the most significant investment in affordable housing ever. We got to get it over the finish line. I believe we will. 65 billion of that is allocated for public housing, which we know are in a state of disrepair, an emergency situation, people living in inhumane conditions, and it's our people for the most part in public housing developments, working class people in many cases all across the city of New York and beyond. Now, of that 65 billion, because New York City has the largest collection of public housing developments in America, New York City alone, NYCHA, is going to get 35 billion just for NYCHA to modernize and improve every single NYCHA development in the city of New York. And then because there's a state match, they'll get an additional 5 billion. That meets NYCHA's capital repair needs. There was no other way that this would have been possible to deal with the state of disrepair that exists in NYCHA other than the federal government stepping in, which we're prepared to do. Now, this is the Build Back Better Act. But to your point, Dr. Jordan, And I was saying this earlier to some of my colleagues. We know NYCHA has a history of falling down on the job. They have a hard time spending efficiently a $5 million contract. I'm just being honest, y'all. $35 billion, we're going to have to do a lot of work in advance to make sure that this money gets spent the right way, lifts up the lives of our people. And by the way, the jobs that get created, at least 50% of them have to go to people in the community connected to this NYCHA investment. And we got to make sure that that happens. So we're going to have to put the infrastructure in place, no pun intended. We're going to have to put the infrastructure in place to allow the infrastructure money to be spent the right way. And certainly I look forward to doing that.
All right, we got two more questions.
Hold on, Pastor. We have Elder Henry who's gonna come in after Michael. But
Right. Go ahead.
oh, and there's another third person. Thank you.
Because we got three questions, and Congressman time is going to be elapsed, I believe. He told me he gave us 45 minutes. Is that correct, Congressman?
Yep. But I'll get all three questions in.
Okay, good. Go ahead.
My question is this. And tax abatement had been given previously to build affordable housing in New York City. However, investors have not built affordable houses. They build condos, co-ops, and so forth. And these have not met the needs of the community in terms of affordable housing to meet their finances to afford it. So my question is this bill that has been passed, what will it do to ensure that tax abatement will not be afforded investors to build affordable housing, but not provide them with affordable housing?
Yeah, it's great. It's a great question. And now I think the program that you may be referring to specifically related to the property tax abatement program, I think it's 421A. That's a state program, and it has been riddled with challenges.
That's correct. That's correct.
And so now at the federal, and that needs to be dealt with at the state level. And, you know, I'm certainly in conversation with my colleagues and will be with the new administration. At the federal government level, one of the things that Congresswoman Clark is leading on, and I'm partnering with her, is to make sure that we change the way area median income is calculated. That area median income, which is short, abbreviated AMI, is the way in which a determination is made as to who's eligible for affordable housing units that's created. But part of the problem with the current formula is that it takes into account not just community or even the city of New York, but it includes some of the wealthy suburban communities that surround the city of New York. So it raises up the area median income. So oftentimes our folks appropriately say, it's supposed to be affordable housing, but it's affordable for who? Because it ain't us. The big problem is that the way the area median income is calculated is that it doesn't relate directly to the communities where the housing is being created. And that's a problem. So what we're working on doing is changing the formula so that it relates to things like perhaps zip code or census tract or community board, much smaller geographic areas. So if it's in East Flatbush, it should match the income for people who are East Flatbush or in Canarsie or in Bedford-Stuyvesant or in East New York. And so we're trying to address, Brother Michael, that concern head on. I feel good that we'll be able to make some progress there.
Next question.
Okay, Elder Henry, you're up.
Congressman Jeffries, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I have two quick questions. Deduction for mortgage interest and state that is capped at $10,000. Will this bill address that? And the second question, what impact does this bill has on inflation since it affects all of us?
Yeah, great questions. I'll take the second one first, quick. The economists, including at Moody's, some of the world's leading economists have said the Build Back Better Act and the infrastructure agreement will have no impact on inflation. We know costs are going up. That relates to supply chain challenges that have emerged from the pandemic. Those supply chain challenges are being addressed. More needs to be done in that area. But I think the inflationary issues that we see hopefully will be short-term in nature. And, you know, by early to mid next year, we'll see the cost moving in the right direction. The other thing about what these bills will do is we're going to lower costs in childcare. For instance, the average American family pays $8,600 a year in childcare. For most American families, we're going to drop that down to somewhere between zero because of the federal government subsidy, or in all cases, no more than 7% of your income per month. So it's going to lower childcare costs. It's going to lower, as I talked about, the cost of life-saving prescription drugs, particularly insulin, which right now, on average, the cost of insulin is about $636 for a month's worth of insulin. I believe the statistics have said we're going to drop that down to about $36 by way of example. There's still more work that will need to be done in the prescription drug area, but we're targeting some of the more frequently utilized medications like insulin to bring those costs down. Housing costs we expect to bring down as well. On taxes, I'm glad you asked that question, because the Republicans in 2017, they passed the GOP tax scam. 83% of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1%. They put the $10,000 cap on state and local tax deductions, as well as property tax deductions, because they knew that would hurt New York, California, New Jersey, Connecticut, Illinois, blue states.
Yes.
This was intentional. And we've been saying, many of my colleagues in the New York delegation, they've said, no salt, no deal. Meaning we got to address this, or we don't think we're going to be able to support this situation, led by my good friend, Tom Swazi in Long Island. As a result, what we do in the House bill, still got to go through the Senate, is that we raise the cap from $10,000 to $72,000, which means that pretty much anyone who makes, I mean, this is going to cover pretty much everybody except the wealthiest amongst us, meaning the wealthiest in the region. And that's why we raised it to $72,000. And a lot of folks who've been capped should see a reduction in your tax bill as a result, if we can get the Build Back Better Act out of the Senate.
Thank you.
Amen. I'm going to ask all future questioners just to ask one question, okay? Because we want to get them in. Go ahead. Move on with the next question.
Miss Florence A. Unmute yourself.
Unmute,
Sister
Flo.
Florence.
Good evening, Assemblymember Jeffries. Oh, I heard I have just one question. Pastor, I'm going to be brief. Just wanted to know, will the new buildings then that has, for instance, in our area, there are houses that the median income of 44,000, but the apartments are like 2,800 for studio, and the condos are starting at 600 for studio and 1.3 million for the 2 bedrooms. So that is one issue. Can we get a youth center? Because we have gun violence and we really need either for education to change to include skills for the young men, or we get a youth center where we teach them skills so that they won't be, because there's a lot of gun violence in our area.
You know, thanks for that. Okay, yeah, I was gonna answer both questions, and I'll answer them quickly.
One question for answer. Go ahead.
You know, as chair of the caucus, I preside over the caucus meetings, And we generally, have a 60-second or less rule, one question, and it's the hardest thing in the world to enforce. So if I ain't able to enforce it with my colleagues, the people of God, I understand, have got questions that need to be answered as well. But I'll answer them quickly. One, we have to change the formula first. We're still in the midst of fighting to do that. And then it has to apply if the building is utilizing federal funding, for instance, like the low-income tax credit program, which is a federal government program. But we're working on that, and we're also working in partnership with the mayor's office and the governor's office to deal with this affordable housing issue, which we know is one of the most significant things that we have to deal with. Another part of the Build Back Better Act that I did not talk about is $5 billion connected to what we call Break the Cycle of Violence programs. These are non-police related programs, violence interruption, community engagement, after school activity, academic enrichment, the types of programs where if you invest in a community on the front end, you bring down crime and violence on the back end. Historic investment, if we're able to get this done. The $5 billion was in the House bill. Break the cycle funding. This was a top priority of the CBC. It's designed to reduce community violence by supporting the programs like youth centers, but the programs in our communities and the community-based groups that have the credibility to turn things around.
Next question.
What could be done in providing access to public housing to the formerly incarcerated?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jordan, for that question. And
excuse me, Pastor Winston Lawrence, Elder Winston Lawrence was before you. I'm sorry.
All right. Let her, since she asked the question, let that be done. Then Elder Winston Lawrence is next. Thank you,
Okay.
Keep us on target. Go ahead, Dr. Jordan.
Okay, Dr. Jordan, you want to just reiterate your question because it got a little muddled there.
Yes, so I asked about providing access to public housing to the formerly incarcerated. What
Yes.
can be done?
Yeah, no, thank you. I've done a lot of work in this area. I was proud to have been a Democratic sponsor of the First Step Act, which passed. We actually convinced the Trump administration. We worked closely with them. President Trump signed it into law, bipartisan criminal justice reform, to help formerly incarcerated individuals successfully reintegrate into society. And that's been very successful. In terms of there are laws on the books or regulations that limit the ability of public housing residents, to your point, former public housing residents who are incarcerated to then come back home and go back and live in public housing. These are laws that came out of the crack cocaine epidemic, where we had incredibly high rates of crime and everything was lock them up, throw away the key, have nothing but punitive consequences. But in some ways, there are challenges because you have people who are released, they're unable to come back to the community, situate themselves, find housing, and it just creates a vicious cycle. So we are looking at what can be done administratively by the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Marsha Fudge, who is very supportive of these type of reentry opportunities. And it's something that's top of mind.
Congratulations, Congressman, on the great work that you've been doing. This is Dr. Lawrence. My quick concern is the permanence of the plans, the Build Back Better and the infrastructure. Given what we're seeing, how permanent is it? Because of course, it's coming up next year,
Yes.
midterm in 2024. Is there a guarantee that proposals will be for 10 years?
That's a great question. In terms of the infrastructure legislation, that's already been signed into law. It's bipartisan in nature. Even if things don't go our way in the midterm elections, those programs are pretty much locked in. Now, with the Build Back Better Act, because it's being done through a reconciliation process, there are some challenges. Some of them are shorter term programs, but all of them have either a 1-year window, in some cases, the extension of the child tax credit being contemplated, it only has a 1-year window, or have a longer term window. For instance, the raising of the SALT tax cap, which would go from 10,000, very punitive, 72,000, take care of almost everybody, with room to spare in our communities. That's for 9 years. But everything is somewhere between a 1 and 10-year window. Now, the good news is, even if things went wrong and somehow Democrats lost the House and lost the Senate, we still got the president. So the president's not signing anything into law that would then undermine these programs. So many of them are guaranteed to last on the Build Back Better Act side for the duration of his presidency, if not beyond. We also believe, having learned from the Affordable Care Act experience, that once you put a program into place that is serving the people, that the people are benefiting from, even if there's a change in government like there was with the Republicans, ultimately they'll be unable to repeal things that are popular because of the backlash politically that they'll get. And that, in fact, was the case in terms of the Affordable Care Act. So now you don't hear them talking about it anymore. The Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. They're done. They got over their obsession. It took 10 years, but they got over their obsession. We think many of these programs, because of their popularity, even if we see a dramatic change in government, because of public sentiment, will be okay.
Thank you. Ahmad, your time has elapsed. I would like to, we have our youth leader here. She represents all the young people in Northeastern Conference. Dr. Paul Olivier, are you there? Paula?
I am here.
All right, we want to bring her in because one of the things I spoke to my colleague about is we want to take a couple buses of young people to DC in the spring sometime to be exposed to how the political machinery functions, okay? And we have a great congressman who's here. We have a couple of them there. So Paula, this is going to be the gentleman. I'm putting him on the spot. I'm gonna lock him in right now to work with us, okay? Say something, Paula. Want to say something, Paula?
You know, I'm glad to be here. I'm fortunate to represent the 30,000 youth and young adults in this conference, and we are eager to work. We're done with sitting on the sidelines, and what I want to do is combine our eagerness to work with the actual methodology of how things get done, and that means being proactive. And this is right in line with what Dr. Martin is offering us, so that we meet and have relationships before we need to meet and have relationships, and are already mobilized and organized to move. So I'm looking forward to working with you, Congressman Jeffries. I hear all these wonderful things about you. You've really touched this community, and I'm excited to be on board and can't wait.
Thank you so much. All
Thanks
right.
so much, Pastor Olivier.
I'm
Look forward to
gonna
working together.
I'm going to ask my colleague who works with me in this department, Pastor Lawrence Brown. Pastor Brown, come on and give our congressman just a word of thanks from us. I'm going to ask him to do that at this juncture.
Absolutely, absolutely. Congressman, the thing that I appreciate about you is that you didn't just start doing this yesterday. You have been moving with integrity. You've been a part of the fabric of our community. And I know for a fact that you have spent more time in our churches than even some of our members have. And we appreciate your authenticity. We appreciate your willingness to do what you got to do, put in the hours, do the advocacy work, and we are well represented. I feel good when I think about names like Jeffries and Obama. These are people that have not embarrassed us. You have done your work. You are thorough, and we appreciate that. And we want you to know that we do keep you in prayer and that we affirm you as you try to make a difference in our communities. I'm old enough to remember when politicians from different parties would be from different parties fought fair. And unfortunately today, you know, it is too frequently a thing where people just go along to get along. But I want to salute you for the way you have operated. And we only wish that we could have a few more of you in there getting the work done. But know that, as Dr. Olivier pointed out, we have a generation of young people that are ready to engage. And I'm so thankful that Dr. Martin, who is our new director, has front and center the desire to teach our conference and its members how to engage, how to be active, how not to just sit on the sideline, but how to make a difference in the community. So we really look forward to some wonderful collaboration happening. And we want to be people who, just like Daniel, who just like Joseph, these people who, yes, they were people of God, but they also had a role to play in making a positive impact in the community. So we thank you, we salute you. And as we close out this evening, I just want to encourage everyone that's listening to remember, don't be so heavenly minded that you are of no earthly good. Amen. We have a work to do until Jesus comes. He says, occupy till I come. Now, don't be preoccupied, but we must occupy till he comes. And so together we can do that and make a difference. Why don't we pray together, beloved?
Pastor Martin, Pastor Martin.
Who's that?
Pastor Martin. Can I ask one question?
We're a little out of time, but I'll go ahead real quick. Sister.
I just want to find out, because I know many families that were depending on the stimulus checks. I want to know what is going on with the stimulus checks, if those families will be still getting them or not.
Well, I think what you probably, first of all, thank you so much, Pastor Brown, for your kind words, and appreciate your thoughts and sentiments. Look forward to the prayer. In terms of the question, I think by stimulus checks, you probably are referring, there was a pandemic assistance, but that was connected to the American Rescue Plan, and that went out as a result of passage of the bill. Those were one-time checks of $1,400. But then we also authorized, as part of that program, the child tax credit monthly payments, where if you had a child between under the age of 6, for every child, you would receive approximately $300 per month. And then for every child between 6 and 17, $250 a month. Now that program, which has been tremendously successful, the overwhelming majority of that money that people receive on a monthly basis is used for food and clothing, groceries, childcare expenses, educational expenses, helping with housing. It's been phenomenally important. It's lifted half of the American children who are in poverty out of poverty. So we got to keep that going. The Build Back Better Act extends it for an additional year on a pathway toward making it permanent, but we extend it for an additional year so that those checks will be received again on the 15th of December. And then when we get Build Back Better Act done, that should continue into the next year. Pastor Brown mentioned something that just triggered a quick thought, which one of my mentors, Eddie Bernice Johnson, one of the first Black women elected to Congress. She's from the Dallas area, very quiet, strong leader, first nurse ever elected, represents the Dallas area. She's retiring after 30 years. But she always said to me when I came to Congress, she said, remember, Hakeem, if your community is not at the table, then they're on the menu. And I just thank you, Pastor Martin, and everyone for making sure that the SDA community is at the table for these discussions so that you're not on the menu. I yield back.
Thank you. No more questions now. Pastor Browns?
You here? Okay. Let us pray together, beloved. Father in heaven, we have a work to do in our communities. You have put us here to have impact and to make a difference and to work with people who are people of integrity and who have at their very heart an interest in making lives better for everybody. We ask that you would strengthen us as a community. We ask that you would give us wisdom, insight, and intestinal fortitude. We ask that you would strengthen the hands of leaders like Congressman Jeffries, who has demonstrated over the years integrity and a willingness to do the right thing no matter what the cost. We ask that we would be able to find more individuals willing to operate from this paradigm as opposed to folks who will just do whatever with the truth that is convenient for them to do with it. Keep us safe, keep us well, keep us active, keep us busy, and keep us blessed. Until we meet again, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Amen,
God
amen.
bless you. Have a nice Thanksgiving. You deserve it. You've worked hard. Go rest yourself for a week, man, and eat all that good food.
Thanks, everybody.
All right,
have a blessed
everybody.
Thanksgiving. Thank you,
Okay.
Pastor.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, take care, Congressman. I want to say something to people before. Listen, everybody. This was I think it was a very fruitful meeting. We're setting the stage to do more of this with our public officials. And one of the things as we listen to what they're saying to us, we want to not just have forums where we discuss things. We want to be people who take action. All right. I'm very concerned about when money is voted, our community getting its share. And one of the things I'm very concerned about is developing entrepreneurship among our young people. We need jobs. We need economic empowerment. These are vital needs that we have in our community. And it's time for us as an Adventist church to build on this. The politicians are here to help us. But we've got to seize these opportunities ourselves, okay? Sister Garrett, I see you looking at me with a smile on your face. This is where you come in. What we've got to do now is position our people so that they can be the recipients of these monies when it comes down, okay? Or other communities will take the opportunity. They'll grab that money and they'll get those contracts and we'll be left out. You follow? We've got to prepare ourselves to be in a position to where we can get these particular opportunities to better our communities. Everybody with me on that? Okay. It's a lot of work. Those of us in ministry can't do it alone. We need our dedicated laymen. Dr. Brown and I, along with all the other conference officers, we'll do our part, but we all have to be a team here to get this done. All right. I trust that you enjoyed today. It was a blessing to you. We look forward to having you on. Dr. Brown and I got a whole lot of work to do, and we'll be sharing all these wonderful meetings with you in the future. God bless you. Good night, everybody. Enjoy the holiday season. Bye-bye.
Good night, Pastor Martin.
And thank you so much, Joanne, for giving us the time, our AY leader. We don't want to forget her. Our AY leader gave us the time, and we thank you, Joanne.
No problem, Pastor.
God bless everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pastor. Wonderful.
I'm no longer tired.